tie it together, like all corrections. Right. So, like, I mean, that if I were to.
We are live for our online audiences. We still have a few people joining us here, but I think we'll go ahead and get started since I know we have some people who are logging in to join us online. So we'll just wait a few minutes since I know we have some more people joining us here in person, and I'm sure online people are starting to see the notification, so we'll have more people joining us momentarily. So yes, as we're just getting started, I can share a few words of introduction for tonight's speaker. I'm Lisa Duncan. I'm an academic director, one of the faculty members here at the CN Art Institute. And we're very delighted to have as our guest speaker this evening, Antonis, who is just a wonderful member of our community, in addition to not just only being our guest speaker this evening, but has been absolutely instrumental in many of our recent project activities here at the CN Art Institute, also dating back to his former participation as a student in our semester program years ago. So it's been wonderful to be able to have kept up our contact with him. He's also been instrumental in our Art Cloud Greece activities based in Athens, Greece. Recently, he has completed his master's program at the University of Bologna in arts, museology, and creators. And in terms of the scope of his work, he is an architect, a cultural worker, and a museum scholar. And his creative practice aims at reappropriation of human-made environments, both cultural and built, and the accessibility and democratization of knowledge, taking a very interdisciplinary approach that includes design, research, and artistic projects. So recently, he's been exploring ways that explore this idea of how the built environment can be culturally mediated in a museum and methods of non-formal learning through cultural activities. So during his presentation this evening, he'll be focusing on this idea, the idea of reappropriating the city and the museum, and focusing on two of his recent projects. So I'll just mention to people who are joining us for our online viewers that you're very much welcome to ask questions during the presentation. We'll have the chance at the end of the talk to answer any questions you might have. So we'll save some time at the end for questions. And of course, that applies also to people who are joining us in person as well. So without further ado, I will turn off my microphone and hand the stage over to Antonis.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone here in person and online. I hope that you can hear me, right? I guess so. So as Lisa mentioned, the talk today has the title Towards Reappropriating the City and the Museum, which is a concept that I have been working through some projects at least the last year. And here today I will present two of these projects that were developed this year. And the first one is a research project, which is in the wider theme of Towards City Museum as Praxis. And the second one is a cultural mediation project, maybe curatorial one, we could say, that is entitled From the Page to the Public Space. Regarding the research project, I will explain a bit further what is the City Museum and why my research is centered around City Museum the last period. And the other project, although it was developed before I start this research, officially at least, we can see that it relates to it at some points. So my research starts from somehow a personal, but also I think a collective realization that the contemporary city often feels like a difficult place to live in due to elements of isolation and powerlessness. So trying to find ways to culturally give some answer to questions of how one possibly tries to change elements of their environment, and if there are supposed to do it alone or together with others in a more collective way, and whether there is a more hopeful future for the situation that we find ourselves in. And as we will see also further, a basic element before actually trying to change elements is to understand the whys and the hows of the contemporary city. And to do that, we could to do that in a cultural way to understand the city. We could do it in using many different formats. But the one that I focus my research on is the city museum. And the reason for that is that I believe that the spatiality that it offers as a place that people can actually meet and have this social moment, while there are made connections between urban life and city planning, urban history and collective memories, between always past, present, but also possible futures. And so the goal of the research, we could say, is somehow a response to an invitation, we could say, from Francesca Lanz to not try to exactly define what the city museum is and can be, but to what is and was, but to start seeking forward-looking manifestos for what it can be in the future. Going a little bit back to the museum in general, in the last decades, we could say that there is a paradigm shift of some kind, that the social potential of the museum is being recognized in order to be relevant to contemporary society. And so sometimes the themes and the topics that are approached are topics that were usually left outside of the mainstream narratives. We have a shift from an object-focused approach to the museum to a content and message-oriented one. And this way, they can actually act as reflection and information centers, as maybe even civic forums for exchange. And by all that, and the moment that I focus maybe more through my research is how they can be enablers in offering pathways for engagement with complex subjects, such as the contemporary city and all the dynamics that form it. And on top of that, the last years, this potentiality, we can say, is theorized as being an obligation actually of the museum as a cultural organization for the common interest. And through this, by recognizing that the museum is not neutral, concepts such as the immorality of inaction are being centered, meaning that when there is some kind of social injustice, if the museum is not recognizing and acknowledging the causes and the consequences, it somehow share part of the responsibility for those injustices. But also some museums nowadays try to imagine and invent also new futures that are more social just and emancipated. Going back to the City Museum, I put a slide of a very, very brief story of its development, and we can locate it mainly in Europe around the mid of 19th century, where major cities were under very big transformations. And these museums were created in some cities to narrate the history and the glorious past that were somehow being lost through these transformations, mainly urban transformations. And this period in Italy, during the process of unification, there is a similar type of museum, but not exactly the same. We could say that it's the civic museums that exist in many cities in Italy. And the slightly different character of the civic museums is that they were trying to point out local traditions and the identity of the city. During the 20th century, there are different opinions by scholars regarding what was happening with city museums. For Lanz, it was a period that they were an outdated type of museum and not really relevant anymore. For Postula, it was although they were profiting by new museographical techniques of the time, new technologies, new ways of presenting their collections, they were still uncritically using the old city history type of the previous century. While for Marshall, while this period, no new city museums were really funded, there was a lot of investment in the existing ones. Nevertheless, they all somehow agree that since the 1990s, with this shift that we saw before of the museum, they start to not look only in the past, but actually to involve with the present of the city, maybe even in the future. And a major there is the use of social history. So we could say brief, not narrating key events like battles or historical events, but to look at the everyday life of people. And in this situation, the participation of the citizens, new collecting practices are essential. And coming to today, the City Museum practitioners have, since the 1990s, have also created the dialogical relationship with each other throughout the globe, we would even say, with annual conferences and meetings that they actually discuss their practices. And this way forward, this change of paradigm for the city museums is being collectively somehow shaped. And here later, anyone can see also the book of abstracts from the last conference, where I put it here, the titles and the people that gave the two keynote speeches, and that were really crucial for my research in order to locate my proposal in the forefront, let's say, of this dialogue that is happening nowadays. And in their speeches, Sandra Yeaman pointed out that museums need to somehow create a collectively and collaboratively common social and capital culture for the visitors in order to be accessible in that sense, to be relevant to them, as well as, and Leontine Meyer van Mee, she described how the vocabulary that have been used the last decades since the 1990s with words such as participatory or community is somehow lost their meaning. And so she was discussing this part, and through my research, I'm trying to maybe locate some meaning back to some words and also some ways to realize them. And so I'm today here I will present mainly one chapter of my research that is called City Museum Mediation as Critical Pedagogy. And there are two concepts, let's say, here that are the main focus. One that is from the museum side, and one that I bring with some different theories of scholars that are not directly linked, but could be linked to this notion. And cultural mediation is what often also in the English-speaking world we call interpretation, but it's not exactly the same in the sense that the mediation tries to build a bridge between the people and the meaning that what they see, what they come in contact may have, by giving them, in how I see it is by giving them the power to do the interpretation. And for that, for me, is one of the most important moments in a museum visit and a museum experience. When we go to the case of a city museum, this would mean to understand the urban context and in order to consequently appropriate it, but also by mediating the common experience, as I write down, of inhabitants of the city, this new inclusive idea of citizenship can be created, which is one of the elements that these kind of museums for me have, in order that, meaning that since the objective of their activity is the city itself and the citizens, one of the objectives could be to create this more inclusive idea, a common sense of belonging by connecting people. So one of the main sources that I used is this book by Paulo Freire that is called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and it's here anywhere. You can all have a look if you want later. And Freire creates this methodology, let's say, for humanization. He recognized the problem of humanization as maybe we recognize at the beginning the problem of the contemporary city being isolating and this feeling of powerlessness. And I chose to use his methodology because it gives a clear also political aim, but also somehow steps that could give some meaning and some practical relation, can create some relation with the museum practice. I choose to make some breaks between the references of Freire in order to give some examples from some museum. And for this presentation, although I studied different museums, I chose to show some different exhibitions from the same museum, which is the Friedrich St. Kreuzberg Museum in Berlin, which is a neighborhood museum. So in the sense that it's not about the whole city of Berlin, but it's studying, it's observing the neighborhood, the life of the citizens in the neighborhood, both in the past but also in the present. It's one of the rare of the few museums that actually reach to the present day through their practice. And this specific exhibition is called Bringing Together Anti-Racist Struggles, an Open Archive. It's a very interesting exhibition because it somehow recreates an archive, inviting people, an archive that is not finished. So it actively invites people to contribute and to create new knowledge, because there are huge gaps in this theme. And it's not, and another element is that it's not only showing racism as an oppressive situation, but also focuses on the struggles of people to overcome the situation and thus to try to reach to a new situation, as we saw before. Some of the other concepts that he analyzes in the book in order to reach to this pedagogy. One of the steps is to name the world, to enter the historical process as a responsible subject. And this will happen through praxis, which is the term that we saw also in the title, and which is an interactive combination of reflection and of action. And he emphasizes how these two elements should be always together in order for our practice to not be just verbalism or just action for action's sake, but to combine and to always inform each other. Another element is that subjectivity and objectivity should always be also in a dialectical relationship, and to study the human-world relationship and not only the personal experience or only an outside reality that is not related to people. And this way we can reach critical consciousness, that is the awareness of some situation that we find ourselves in. And then there are some certain elements that he puts on that. While he also analyzes how this liberating pedagogy should be co-intentional and problem-posing, meaning that people should actually participate in the creation of knowledge in a degree, as we saw before at the example of the archive, but also that this reality should be posed to them as a problem, in the sense of a challenge that asks from them some reaction, and this comes different with banking methods of learning that is someone giving information to other people and creating a more passive relationship. I chose after to show another exhibition from the same museum that is called History in the Making, Demolition and Protest at Bassetor. And as you see, this exhibition has a time span that goes from the mid-20th century to almost our days. It was updated in 2015. And in this case, I chose these two pictures because I think that it can show how in this exhibition, both subjectivity and objectivity are somehow related and presented at the same time, because it also talks about clearing the way for a new city. So urban changes that are completely transforming the neighborhood at this decade, but also the impact that this has to everyday life, to people that in order for huge urban transformation to happen, they are being dislocated and often with violent ways. Some other steps of this pedagogy is to define the content of it, and Freire also gives some directions on how to do that, and he stresses out that it's important to have as a starting point the present existential situation and to reflect the aspiration of people. In order for this pedagogy, for this situation to be relevant to the everyday life. Very briefly now, he somehow he make us he proposes to define some generative themes that these can be found in limit situations and in limit acts, meaning that limit situation, as he describes, is a barrier in our everyday life to achieve a certain situation that is put from outside to us, while limit acts is what we do in order to overcome these barriers. And in these situations, there are, as we said before, challenges maybe that can act as the content of this pedagogy, which should be constantly investigated and decoded in order for people to get more fully awareness of these situations. Another exhibition from the museum that relates to that is called Local Chat, City Migration History. And in this exhibition, it is stressed out how the city has been changing, the neighborhood has been changing through the migration waves that through history have been very crucial for the identity of the whole neighborhood. And this was an oral history project. On the left side, you can see the exhibition space, that these stories that were collected were positioned in a map that was on the floor, and people could hear or see videos or in different formats these testimonies from today's people. And so in this way, the present city was in a way created by the people that live there. And I chose to also share with you the different themes, let's say, that this exhibition grouped all the different testimonies from the citizens. The last part I'm sharing from Freire is his listing, let's say, from certain dialogical and anti-dialogical cultural action, which for me was very important in order to characterize certain museum practices that I was studying during the research, because here maybe are a bit general, as in the whole book, but with a certain, let's say, creative analogy, we can actually testimony them in the museum mediation. And some of them, for example, is what he calls conquest, which he explains that is the action of presenting the world as fixed and given, and that's not something that can actually change towards a more emancipatory situation. Divide and rule, according to Freire, is the action that by giving a focalizing view, it restricts us from having an understanding of a more wide totality. Manipulation, he describes as forced objectives, and cultural invasion as imposed worldviews. On the other hand, there are the dialogical cultural action, which through which people meet to name and transform the world together through solidarity and critical consciousness, which is necessary to witness a common maybe oppression. And by witnessing this as a common task also, this struggle through organization. And I add here another example from the second exhibition we saw that I wanted to add this because it shows how the exhibition reaches to present day problems and concerns of the people, and somehow maybe also shows what action can look like. For example, on the left side again, for user left side, this part was related to gentrification and of how the neighborhood is turned into a party place. So, but how this affects the everyday life of people and how people react to that. While the other image, the other moment of the exhibition relates to housing occupation of refugees that was in the neighborhood and was constantly in a way of in a process of negotiating its existence, let's say. Here I just put some of the other chapters of the research, but I don't think that there is necessary to focus. Maybe after we can discuss. Are there maybe questions so far or any comments?
We have an online question.
I don't know if we want to do that, or I can also present the other project. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. Just turn on my microphone here. So this was actually also something I was interested in about, so I was very glad to see this question popped up from Jeff, who was saying, a question is, a museum within a city should stimulate the imagination both of local citizens and of visitors from other places. So could you comment, please, on the ease or difficulty of addressing these two different audiences?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's a very interesting point, and maybe I didn't clearly mention before that usually the city museums today, or at least those that I study or those that my research focuses on, have as audience mainly the citizens and not the visitors of a city, because they want to build this common belonging in a city. But it's probably unavoidable that we also, as a city museum, you also refer to visitors of the city. And my thought about that is that, for example, with the case of gentrification, and touristification also maybe of cities and especially city centers, I think that addressing it in the museum, that both locals and visitors would visit, can also create a new understanding of those visiting a city, of what their actions, what consequences their action can have to the people living there. So I think that these moments like this are very crucial to actually to to bring together those two audiences in a way of mutual understanding, in a way, and yes, to mutual understanding of the situation that they found themselves together. And there was another example from the exhibition that is a local protest house that they have built to demand housing rights in the neighborhood. And for example, also they invite visitors and tourists to join and to go to this protest space and understand what the people are fighting for, and probably also help them. So I think that those moments are regarding the present day and not looking at the history, which is also another whole big chapter, is something very interesting that would relate much to the focus, let's say, of the research. Hope it makes sense. Maybe I go on, and at the end we have plenty of time. So enough with the with the theory, and now I will show you a small project that I did in Bologna during my internship, which the internship was at Museo Spazio Pubblico, which means public space museum, and it's an initiative in Bologna that studies public space culture. And as you can see in the picture, the space could seem quite empty. It doesn't have a collection because the theme of the museum is not something to be collected, but an element of the city itself. So I developed this project that's called From the Page to the Public Space. While I had first took part in the cataloging of the library of the museum, which now, if you would pass by, you would see it on the right side. When the photograph was taken, it was not yet there. And for this project, I would like to thank also the director of the museum, Luisa Bravo, that supported me and trusted me to do this project. But what is the project? This is the library that is now on one of the side walls of the museum. And as I said, the museum doesn't have a collection, but may host various workshops or talks or exhibitions of public art and to approach public space from different points. And there is also the public space library that is an open resource of books related to urban design and architecture, but also art and sociology around the theme of public space and the city. So during my internship, as I said, I was cataloging the library. So I came in close contact, let's say, in close encounter with many of these books and their themes. And what I felt is that all this knowledge is very often not directly accessible, or it's difficult to reach, and that these themes are very often discussed in closed circles of experts, of university students. So this was somehow the initial idea. So I thought that we catalog the collection. I treated the library as a collection in this case. We cataloged it, we displayed it in a quite unorthodox way. It was a thematic arrangement, let's say, a display. Then we need to curate, but also to mediate it. And I put myself to think how we could do that. So, and from that mediation, what would be the vision and the goal? So the vision for me would be that these themes would keep evolving together with the communities that they relate to, and not on those expert closed circles that I said before. So for that to happen, the content needs to reach the people, and also, yes, and also, so we selected these 3 books based on the messages that they would carry. And I don't know if you can read the titles. The first one is the title of the first one is Transforming Public Space Through Play by Gregor News. The second is called Age Inclusive Public Space, while the third book from Alison Sand is called From the Ground Up, Local Efforts to Create Resilient Cities. So the messages that these books carry are messages of empowerment and emancipation in and through the public space. And the decision was to somehow translate the textual, so the content of the book, into a visual form, believing that this would be a more welcoming, direct, and approachable way of an entry point, maybe, to the book. So these three diagrams were created as visual summary, we could say, of the books, and they were exhibited alongside the library. And the idea, as I said before, is that maybe somebody is not used to read academic books, is not used to read big books based on practice and examples of practice, and that may even be off-putting for many people. But these are people that this content relates to. So the hope is that from encountering maybe a more a visual entry point to the content could be a way to bring it closer to people. But this way they were still, let's say, constrained inside the walls of the museum on a building that maybe, if it's not very well known in the city, maybe it's not visited by many people. So to overcome also maybe that situation, the idea was that these visual compositions, this visual summary, can become even a bit smaller and actually be inscribed on t-shirts, and this way for this content, for these themes to actually start circulating back to the public space that they talk about. And so here we have also the t-shirts that you can see. And my idea behind this project is that also now the traditional characteristics of an exhibition have completely changed, because there is no specific time and space that this display, let's say, takes place, but that people that may wear this t-shirt can reenact the exhibition. And what is important maybe to say is that these t-shirts are, as I said, some entry points to some themes. They make a connection back to the museum, where maybe people can go deeper into this theme if they want. They make a connection to the book. They include the citation of the book. And while it may be some passing some message, I think that this situation, at least from my experience, is a situation that can actually maybe start a dialogue. And this dialogue that I said before, for these themes to continue being reshaped, doesn't need to be a formal one in the form of a conference or something, but it can be an everyday encounter of people that maybe from something they see in the street, they start discussing these themes. So these are some pictures that we can see the exhibition appearing around Bologna. And this was it. That was it. Thank you very much.
As the evening light has come in, we have this very dramatic lighting on you now. It's somewhat unexpected, but it adds to the drama of the event. So, well, it's we have just some nice positive comments that have come in from our online viewers, but not any further questions. I don't know if there were. Yes, we have a question back here.
The fascination
within really interesting. But going from the those three books that you mentioned to the three visuals, and then from the three visuals or from the three books to the T-shirts is quite an act of not controlling, but I mean you're distilling a book into a page and a page into a T-shirt. So I'm just wondering if you could tell us a bit more how you did that.
Yes.
Because displaying on the body is pretty powerful. So.
Yes, so I mean, it was a long process that I had to really read the book and understand the whole aspect of it. And then there was a part of summarizing, but also a part that I was following the writer's lead into key ideas, key words, concepts. For example, on the green one, from the ground up, because it's also when we create a visual composition, it's also important the hierarchy that is being created between the different elements. And for example, from the ground up, the next maybe element that is the stronger one are actually the title of the 4 chapters that the book has. So I followed the writer's lead into making a hierarchy of concepts and key words, and then trying to show, for example, maybe here is more evident to show the relationship between those key elements. So of course, from this is a visual, as I said, summary. It cannot, of course, contain all the details. Choose the main content, and then also some parts that could work as a call to people, as this call to action that can maybe act towards the 3 different themes. I don't know if some example wouldn't be very possible, but for example, yes, in the age inclusive public space, the authors were asking to start creating intergenerational contact zones. So, for example, that one is, I think, quite an important part of the visual summary. Does it make sense? Okay.
Was there, sorry, may I ask, was there any, at any point, a performative aspect to the, I mean, it's performance in itself, but the different people wear different t-shirts, did you?
Yes, when we were taking the pictures. It was a way for me to have a documentation of the work, and it was definitely a performance. And here I want to thank my friends, Melina, Hannah, and also Musti, that is not here, the picture, but yeah. And the t-shirts were, let's say, were available for somebody. We printed, of course, a small number because there was no budget or something for this project. And they were available on the day of the opening event of the library. So it was the moment that somehow the project was exhibited to the audience that we had invited, and they were available there for people to take.
The first slide of this project is the photograph of the museum.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to ask you if it's casual, but I think so. That then are separated is to give a playing feeling, or
who knows? I never asked actually. It was also something that I was observing. I observed many times. It's funny how it creates io pubblico. I think that part is interesting, but to be honest, I didn't ask that at any point.
We can do something with this. For instance, in this museum space, si dice museo o spazio pubblico? I mean, what kind of activity? I mean, it doesn't mean exactly in this case public space. I mean, what
Yes, for the museum, the objective is to create discussion around public space and all the dynamics. They take part in conferences from a more, let's say, academic point of view. The founder and the director is also a professor of architecture I think in the University of Florence. So it combines the academic side with some more community events that can be some workshop about different, again, themes of public space, but they also, the museum manages a small part that is just out the other corner of the crossroad that is next to the museum. And on that space, they take place also some public art installations, you can say.
So, for instance, it means that anyone in theory could come and propose a subject for a
I
conference.
think yes.
So interesting. But before talking regarding the Linee, you mentioned about the protest space.
Can you go
The
in?
protest space.
Yes, it's not here, but yes.
Yeah, maybe you can tell something more. I mean, what's the
Yes.
connection between a museum as a public space and a protest space?
Yes.
What is the connection?
So you asked about, because I don't know if people online can hear that. You asked me to talk more about protest space that I mentioned, and the relation to the museum space. It would be interesting to be able to have more images, but now I think it will complicate things. No. No, because in this specific museum, it's interesting that on one hand, protest space in general is exhibited, but not in a way of commemorating some protest. But I think what is very interesting in this museum is that it is really presented as a limit act, as Paulo Freire said, as the action that people do in order to manifest the struggle against something. And in the mediation that the museum offers, it's really explained also what they are opposed to and how they reacted. And maybe in some cases also if they have succeeded in creating something new. And this is very important. In other parts of the thesis, the light now is, I also mentioned that regarding protests, it's also in a museum, it's also very important to somehow contextualize also the legal aspect of it in the sense of is it presented as something that unconsciously or systemically is being rendered as illegal or is being demonized, or is it shown as something that is an instrument for political action? And in this case, I would say that the second happens. That's why I chose to focus on that. Then, for the specific protest space I mentioned before, it's a space that people have created in this neighborhood in order to have a physical space and not a demonstration. Anyway, to have a constant presence on the public space. So in a square, they have created a small hut, like that is always there, and it's inviting people. I believe that the fact that the museum makes a connection with that space, which is also now active. It's not something of the past that we bring and musealize it. It's something, it's the museum, this museum creating a connection with another existing element of the neighborhood, which is a few blocks away, actually. And I think that, as also replying to Jeff, that protest hat, if they are inviting also visitors to understand the housing struggle of the neighborhood, a visitor that may visit it, a tourist that may visit the museum, from this connection may understand also the everyday struggle of the neighborhood. I think this is very, yes.
I have a question about the selection of the exhibition that you choose,
Mhm.
because I saw in this part you selected mostly or mainly the one from this Kreuzberg,
Yes.
you mean Berlin, but maybe how did you, and from
For this presentation, I chose to stay in the same museum in order to cut time from introducing and having different contexts. And in my research, this museum is somehow the one that could work, we can say, as an example of good practice, according to the criteria that I set through the methodology that I propose. Some others that I studied for my research are two examples in Bologna, a photography exhibition and a city history museum that is there, and also a city history museum in Athens. And what is interesting is that between each other, are all very different cases, but also the mediation that they do is completely different with each other. And for example, from this anti-dialogical cultural action, in the Athens Museum, we could barely find only these elements because it's really following that model of the 20th century that followed the model of the 19th century. In Bologna, there are interesting cases, but the main finding, let's say, of the research is that they stop some around the turn of the millennia, around when history comes to close. Usually museums that deal with history stop. While for this one, as I saw here, I think it's very important that it actually touches the present day condition of the city.
yeah, great.
Does it make sense? Yeah.
Mhm.
Perhaps there's not other questions. I have a few more questions myself, but we can, for our in-person audience, we can continue the conversation over snacks and drinks. And also for our in-person audience, we also have some interesting material, the actual t-shirts here, which you are very welcome to take a look at. But perhaps in the interest of time for our online viewers, we can wrap up. But thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Antonis, for your wonderful presentation. And we hope you all can be joining us the same time next week when we'll have Geraldina here in the front row, who will be our speaker for the same time next Tuesday. So